The first thing I noticed was that my aunt had put my name on the program. Not my rank, not my branch, not even the word Army. Just Rachel Mercer, Government Administration. I stood in the entrance of the Lakeshore Community Hall, with 30 hours of work still sitting behind my eyes, and stared at the little cream-colored booklet in my hand. Across the room, my cousin Grant got 3 lines. Major Grant Caldwell, U.S., Army Special Forces, Bronze Star recipient. Underneath that was a photograph of him in uniform. I almost laughed, almost. Rachel. My Aunt Beth came toward me in a navy blue dress that probably cost more than the Subaru I had parked outside. She gave me the kind of hug people give when they are trying not to wrinkle their clothes. You made it. I said I would. Her eyes moved over my charcoal blazer, black slacks, and practical shoes. You came straight from work? Pretty much. She glanced toward the parking lot windows. Still driving that Subaru? It still starts. Beth smiled like I had just confirmed something she had suspected for years. Well, some people aren't interested in appearances. That was Beth's favorite kind of insult. The kind she could deny 5 seconds later. Around us, Willow Creek was doing Memorial Day the way small Michigan towns do it. Folding chairs filled the community hall. Paper flags stood in mason jars. Local businesses had bought sponsorship tables. The Rotary Club was selling raffle tickets for a fishing boat nobody needed. 3 old men from the VFW sat near the stage, arguing about whether the Tigers had any chance that season. It should have felt familiar. Instead, I checked the front entrance, the kitchen door, and the emergency exit beside the coatroom before I even realized I was doing it. Old habit. Grant noticed. He was standing near the stage in dress uniform, talking to the high school principal. When our eyes met, he lifted a hand. Unlike Beth, Grant's smile was real. Rack. He crossed the room and hugged me. You look wrecked. Good to see you, too. No, seriously. When did you sleep? Thursday. It was Monday. He gave me a look. What kind of office keeps somebody for 30 hours? The government kind. Beth had followed him over. She means somebody forgot to finish a report. Grant didn't laugh. Beth did. I had been hearing versions of that joke since I was 22. Before that, there had been different jokes. When Grant made varsity football, Beth rented the back room at Giovanni's Pizza and invited half the neighborhood. When I earned a full Army ROTC scholarship to the University of Michigan, she asked whether the military was basically paying me to become a secretary. When I commissioned, she gave me a pen set. For all the paperwork, she'd said. My father, Michael, had waited until everyone left that night before handing me his old steel pocket watch. It wasn't valuable. The glass was scratched, and the chain had been repaired twice. On the back, he'd engraved 7 words himself. You don't need an audience to know what time it is. Dad died 2 years later. Cancer. Not dramatic. Not classified. Not heroic enough for Beth to turn into a story. Just 6 ugly months of hospital coffee, insurance forms, and watching the strongest man I knew become too tired to climb the stairs. The night before he died, he made me promise one thing. Don't let loud people grade your life. I wish I could say I followed that advice perfectly. I didn't. Some wounds don't disappear just because you grow up. You just get better at walking without showing the limp. At the banquet, Beth had seated Grant at the center table beside the mayor, the sheriff, and the president of the local bank. My mother, Elaine, sat 2 tables back. I was beside her. That part didn't surprise me either. Mom squeezed my hand when I sat down. You came. I told you I would. I know. She always said things twice when she was relieved. On stage, volunteers tested the microphone. Silverware clinked. Someone opened the kitchen doors, and the smell of barbecue chicken rolled through the room. Beth leaned over my shoulder. Grant's speaking tonight, so I saw. The scholarship committee asked him to talk about real service. You know, leadership under pressure. There it was. Real service. Beth never had to say what she meant next. She had been saying it for 20 years. Grant risked his life. Rachel sat behind a computer. Grant had stories. Rachel had security badges. Grant wore medals. Rachel wore gray blazers. I had learned a long time ago that defending myself only made Beth happier. She loved arguments because arguments meant she had successfully dragged you onto her stage. So I unfolded my napkin. That's nice. Her smile tightened. Before she could answer, a server bumped the back of my chair, carrying a tray of iced tea. I shifted sideways before the glasses tipped, caught the edge of the tray with one hand, and steadied it. Whoa, the teenage server said. You're good. No harm done. Grant was staring at me, not at my hand, at my shoulder. My blazer had pulled slightly across the left side, exposing the thin white edge of a scar near my collarbone. His expression changed, just a little. Rachel? Yeah? Where'd you get that? Beth looked before I could answer. Oh, please? She works in an office. Probably lost a fight with a filing cabinet. A couple people at the table chuckled. I pulled my blazer back into place. Grant didn't. His eyes stayed on the scar, then on the chair I had chosen, then on the emergency exit behind him. Something in his face had gone quiet. What happened? He asked again. I took a sip of water, occupational hazard, and for the first time all evening, Grant Caldwell stopped looking at me like his quiet cousin with a government desk job. He looked at me like a question he wasn't sure he wanted answered. Grant kept glancing at me through the first 20 minutes of the banquet, but he didn't ask about the scar again. That was one thing I had always respected about him. For all the noise Beth made around his life, Grant himself knew when a door was closed. I wish I could say the rest of the family had learned the same lesson. They hadn't. To them, my career was still a blank space, and people hate blank spaces. They fill them with whatever story makes them comfortable. The truth was, I had never planned on spending my adult life in rooms with no windows. When I left Willow Creek for the University of Michigan, I was 18, broke enough to know exactly how many miles I could drive before the gaslight became a real problem, and stubborn enough to believe an Army ROTC scholarship was the closest thing I was ever going to get to freedom. Beth told everyone I had joined because college was expensive. She wasn't completely wrong. What she never understood was that money got me through the door. It wasn't what made me stay. ROTC was the first place where being quiet didn't automatically mean people assumed you had nothing to say. If you knew your job, showed up prepared, and didn't panic when everybody else did, somebody eventually noticed. I wasn't the fastest runner in my class. I wasn't the loudest cadet. I was the person who remembered that the bridge on the training map had been marked unsafe 3 pages back while everybody else was arguing about which route looked shorter. Small things. Patterns. Things people ignored because they were in a hurry to look impressive. After commissioning, I went into military intelligence. Beth told my mother that sounded more administrative than military, which honestly made me laugh the first time I heard it. By then, I had already learned something useful. People usually insult what they don't understand, using the vocabulary available to them. My first real lesson came during a deployment to East Africa. I was still young enough to think competent people always sounded confident. That assumption lasted about 3 weeks. We were supporting a regional task force, monitoring a militant network that had been moving weapons through civilian aid corridors. One afternoon, a logistics officer dropped a stack of manifests on my desk and told me there was nothing interesting in them. Antibiotics, bottled water, infant formula, fuel vouchers, normal relief shipments. I probably would have agreed if one truck hadn't bothered me. It was scheduled to carry refrigerated insulin. The route assigned to it had no functioning cold storage stops for nearly 6 hours. I checked again, then again. The vehicle registration belonged to a company that hadn't renewed its commercial license in 8 months. Probably outdated paperwork, another analyst said. Maybe. That word gets people killed. I pulled county-level road records, customs entries, satellite traffic patterns, even public Facebook posts from a clinic that was supposed to receive the shipment. The clinic had posted that its refrigeration system had been broken for 2 weeks. So why send insulin there? By midnight, we had the answer. There was no insulin. The truck was being used to move 3 kidnapped contractors across the border under humanitarian markings. We intercepted it before sunrise. Nobody shot their way through a gate. Nobody made a movie speech. 3 exhausted people climbed out of the back of a truck, and one of them kept asking if someone had called his wife. That was the first time Colonel Rebecca Shaw really noticed me. She found me later in a break room eating peanut butter crackers from a vending machine because dinner had come and gone without anybody realizing it. You caught that from a refrigeration route? The route didn't make sense. She leaned against the counter. Most people see what they're told to see, Mercer. I shrugged. That seems dangerous in our line of work. She smiled once. Exactly. Years later, that sentence still stayed with me. The harder assignments came after that. So did the mistakes I almost made, which taught me more than the successes ever did. There was a mission in the Sahel where we had a clean strike window on a weapons broker responsible for more deaths than I care to count. Every indicator said take the shot. The aircraft was lined up. The operations officer beside me was already counting down. Then I saw two thermal signatures enter the attached structure. Small, too small. Hold! The room went quiet. The major beside me looked over. Mercer, we lose this window. He disappears. Two noncombatants just entered. We don't know that. I do. How? One is carrying something with both hands. Height under 4 feet. Second one keeps matching pace. He stared at the feed. Kids? Looks like it. We held. The target escaped that night. For about 48 hours, I was the least popular person in the building. 3 weeks later, we got him alive at a checkpoint without hurting anyone else. Colonel Shaw sat beside me afterward and slid a styrofoam cup of terrible coffee across the table. You still think you made the right call? Yes, you answered fast. I had 3 weeks to think about it. That earned another half smile. Good, because authority doesn't tell you what kind of person to be when the easy option is ugly. That was the part Beth would never understand. She thought dangerous work looked like camouflage, helicopters, and men carrying rifles. Sometimes it did. Sometimes it looked like a woman under fluorescent lights saying no, while 10 people around her wanted yes. By the time Operation Silent Meridian began, I had spent more than a decade learning how expensive small details could become. The mission started with a special forces team tracking a weapons financier through an abandoned industrial district near the coast. Their original extraction site had been compromised. 2 operators were wounded. Communications were unstable. A hostile convoy was moving in from the east, another from the south. I was in a fusion cell hundreds of miles away with satellite feeds, drone imagery, municipal infrastructure records, radio traffic, and 11 lives attached to every decision I made. Northstar Six, the team leader said over the radio. His breathing was hard but controlled. Primary route is gone. I see it. We have movement closing west. Don't go west. A pause. That's our only open street. No, it's the only open street you can see. I pulled an old municipal engineering map onto my second screen. Most of the district had been built in the 70s. Heavy manufacturing, drainage, service conduits, maintenance access. There. A tunnel. Not marked on the current city plan. I checked the drone feed. Behind a collapsed warehouse, weeds covered a rectangular concrete depression. The surface temperature was lower than the surrounding ground. An opening. Move north 30 yards. Blue loading dock. Find the retaining wall behind it. Northstar, that's a dead end. Trust me for 60 seconds. Rounds snapped over someone's microphone. The team leader cursed. If you're wrong, we're boxed in. I kept my voice level. Then don't let me be wrong. They found the access panel. Rust welded it shut. One operator used a breaching tool while I rerouted the drone and redirected an Overwatch platform to make the hostile vehicles think the team was still moving west. The first vehicle took the bait, then the second. For 18 minutes, I guided 11 men through a maintenance tunnel that smelled, according to one very irritated sergeant, like Detroit sewer water and bad decisions. Even in the middle of all that, somebody laughed. That's Americans for you. Put us in a tunnel with people trying to kill us, and eventually somebody makes a joke. At the far end, the team hit another problem. A service gate had been chained from the outside. Air support offered to hit a pursuing vehicle. I refused. There was an apartment block 50 yards beyond it. We can contain the blast, somebody said. Not enough. Northstar, they're closing. Then give me 20 seconds. We used a surveillance angle from an orbiting platform to identify a delivery alley behind the gate. One of the wounded operators squeezed through a broken section of fencing first. The rest followed. 9 minutes later, the radio cracked alive again. Northstar 6, this is actual. I stopped breathing. Go. All friendlies accounted for. I closed my eyes for 1 second. That was all I allowed myself. On the main screen, the status board changed. 11 friendlies recovered. Nobody in Willow Creek ever heard that story. Nobody was supposed to. And sitting there at the Memorial Day banquet years later, watching Grant laugh politely at something the mayor said, it never occurred to me that one of those 11 men was sitting less than 20 feet away. By the time Beth walked onto the stage, the room had settled into that polite Memorial Day mood. Small towns know well. People had finished dinner. Coffee was being poured. Kids from the high school JROTC program were standing along the back wall in uniforms that still looked a little too big on them. A slideshow of local veterans rolled silently behind the podium. There were grainy Vietnam photos, Gulf War pictures, young faces beside Humvees, fathers and daughters in dress uniforms. It should have been the kind of night where everybody remembered that service came in 100 different forms. Beth somehow managed to turn it into a ranking system. She tapped the microphone twice. "Can everyone hear me?" The room answered with a few yeses. Beth smiled. "Good, because tonight we have someone here who represents what real service looks like. I didn't have to look up. I already knew." Grant shifted in his chair. Beth launched into his record like she was reading the opening ceremony at the Super Bowl. Deployments, awards, Special Forces qualification, leadership positions. She mentioned the Bronze Star twice. She told a story about him helping evacuate a wounded teammate that I knew Grant hated talking about, because he had once told me half the story wasn't even hers to tell. People applauded. Grant smiled because that's what you do when 100 people are looking at you. Then Beth looked at me. That's when I knew she wasn't finished. "I think families are interesting," she said. "Two people can grow up with the same values and choose very different paths." A few heads turned. My mother went still beside me. Beth kept smiling. "My niece Rachel has also worked with the Army for many years." Worked with, not served in, not commissioned. Worked with. She handles intelligence reports and administrative support. Very important behind-the-scenes work. There was a small, polite clap. I almost admired the technique. Beth never told a clean lie when a carefully arranged half-truth would work better. She pointed toward me. "Stand up, Rachel." "I didn't. I'm good here." A few people laughed. Beth's smile hardened. "Come on, don't be shy. I said I'm good." Grant looked at his mother. "Mom." "What? I'm including her." No, she wasn't. She was placing me where she had always placed me, close enough to the spotlight that everyone could see I wasn't standing in it. Beth continued. "Rachel has always preferred the quieter side of government work. Some people are simply built for the front lines, and some are built to support them." The mayor looked down at his coffee. One of the VFW guys frowned. My mother whispered, "Beth, that's enough." Beth either didn't hear her or enjoyed pretending she hadn't. She looked at my blazer. "Actually, Rachel, Grant might be able to help you. There are good civilian positions opening near Fort Campbell, aren't there, honey? Stable hours, better benefits. You wouldn't have to keep working these awful overnight shifts." Grant's face changed. "She's already Army." Beth waved that away. "You know what I mean." I stared at the condensation running down my water glass. There are moments when people expect anger because anger would make everybody more comfortable. If I had yelled, Beth could have called me defensive. If I had walked out, she could have called me dramatic. So I stayed seated. That bothered her more. "You still have that old Subaru too, don't you?" she said. Rachel has never cared much about moving up in the world. A woman from the scholarship committee shifted in her seat. Beth wasn't reading the room anymore. People like Beth stop reading rooms the moment they think they own them. "No husband," she continued. "No kids, no house on the lake. 18 years in government, and she still looks like she just graduated college and rented her first apartment. Beth." My mother said it louder this time. Beth turned. "Oh, Elaine, I'm teasing." That sentence had covered more damage in our family than insurance ever could. I heard Grant exhale through his nose. Then Beth made the mistake. Maybe she was annoyed because I hadn't reacted. Maybe the room wasn't laughing enough. Maybe some part of her had always needed me beneath Grant so badly that the moment she felt that hierarchy slipping, she reached for the sharpest thing she had. "Your father would have understood what I mean," she said. The room went quiet. I looked up. Beth saw that she finally had my attention, so she pushed harder. "Michael respected people who took risks. He believed in courage. I think he would be disappointed that you spent all these years sitting safely behind people like Grant." My mother made a sound beside me. Not quite a gasp. More like something breaking quietly. I stood. Not fast. Not dramatically. Just enough to make Beth stop smiling. "Don't use my father's memory to decorate your opinion." Nobody moved. Beth blinked. Then she laughed once. "Rachel, honestly, don't be so sensitive." I could have lived with almost anything else she had said that night. The car. The job. The marriage comments. Even the little public performance. But Dad had been gone 25 years, and Beth still thought his memory belonged to whoever spoke the loudest. No, I said. You don't get to do that. She opened her mouth. Grant stood up. Mom, stop. Beth looked almost offended. What is wrong with everyone tonight? Grant wasn't looking at her anymore. He was looking at me. Really looking. His eyes moved from my left shoulder to the emergency exit, then to the secure device clipped beneath the edge of my blazer. I watched his expression change in stages. Confusion. Recognition of something he couldn't place. Then unease. Rachel. I didn't answer. Were you ever attached to special operations? Beth stared at him. What kind of question is that? I kept my eyes on Grant. That's not something I discuss here. His jaw tightened. He took one step closer. What command? Grant. What command? Not here. He stopped. I saw the moment a memory hit him, not because he told me, because operators have a certain look when the past stops being the past. His face drained slightly. Did you work Silent Meridian? My hand tightened around the edge of the chair. Behind him, Beth gave a little laugh. Silent what? Grant ignored her. I said nothing. He came closer. The banquet hall had become so quiet I could hear the ice machine cycling behind the kitchen doors. Rachel. His voice was lower now. What was your call sign? I could have refused. Part of me wanted to. Not because I was ashamed. Because for years that name had belonged to another world. Concrete rooms. Red clocks. Radio static. People I never met trusting my voice because they had no other option. Beth had spent the whole evening demanding proof. I didn't owe her any. But Grant wasn't asking for Beth. He was asking because somewhere inside him a door had just opened. So I answered. Northstar Six. Grant's hand slipped off the back of his chair. His face went completely blank. Then he stood straight, not casually, not like a cousin at a fundraiser, at attention. Beth stared at him. Grant? He didn't answer. Grant, what are you doing? His eyes stayed on me. Silent Meridian, he said. I nodded once. He swallowed. Industrial sector outside Darun? I nodded again. He looked like somebody had punched him. You were the controller. I was mission lead. Beth gave an irritated sigh. For God's sake, what does that even mean? Grant turned toward her so sharply she took half a step back. It means you need to stop talking. The entire room froze. Beth's face went red. Excuse me? Grant reached for the microphone. She held on to it. He didn't yank it away. He just looked at her until she let go. Then he faced the room. 5 seconds earlier, Beth had been telling these people what service looked like. Now Grant was holding her microphone. 5 years ago, he said, my team got cut off during an operation overseas. Nobody coughed. Nobody touched a plate. We had 11 men. 2 wounded. Our extraction bird had to turn around. Vehicles were closing from 2 directions, and our primary route was gone. He looked at me. We thought we were finished. My mother covered her mouth. Grant continued. There was a voice in our headsets. Northstar Six. She had drone coverage, satellite feeds, old municipal plans, things we couldn't see from the ground. Beth's face had started changing. Not remorse. Not yet. Fear of losing control. She found a maintenance tunnel behind a warehouse that wasn't on our current maps. She moved surveillance assets to draw vehicles away from us and walked 11 men through that place one turn at a time. Beth shook her head. So she gave you directions. Grant stared at her. I had never seen him look at his mother like that. No, his voice was flat. She had mission authority. Beth's mouth closed. My commander was taking guidance from her. Aircraft were moving because she told them to move. We were moving because she told us to move. He paused. Then came the part I knew he remembered most. Air support had a shot at one of the vehicles chasing us. Taking it would have made our escape easier. He looked around the room. Northstar canceled it. Someone near the stage whispered, Why? Grant answered without looking away from me. Apartment building nearby. Civilians. He rubbed one hand across his jaw. We were angry. I was angry. We were being hunted, and someone hundreds of miles away was telling us no, because there were people in a building we couldn't even see. His voice became rougher. She got us out anyway. The old VFW men were staring at me now. The mayor wasn't pretending to drink his coffee anymore. Grant lowered the microphone. All 11 came home. Beth looked at me as if I had become somebody else while she wasn't paying attention. Grant shook his head. No, that's not right. He looked at me. His eyes were wet now, though he clearly hated that fact. I've spent 5 years wondering who Northstar Six was. My throat tightened. He gave a short laugh that had no humor in it. I've told guys from that team that if I ever met the person behind that voice, I'd buy them the most expensive drink I could afford. Nobody laughed. Grant stepped closer. And the whole time you were sitting across from me at Christmas. That one hurt more than I expected. Because buried beneath all the satisfaction of watching Beth finally run out of words was something I hadn't prepared for. Grant wasn't looking at me with awe. He was looking at me with regret, and somehow that was heavier. Behind him, Beth still held herself stiffly, like if she stayed upright long enough the old version of the family might come back. It didn't. For the first time in my life, she had nothing to say, and for the first time in hers, nobody in the room needed her to explain who I was. Beth was quiet for maybe 10 seconds. Then she did what she had always done when reality stopped cooperating with her. She tried to rewrite it. "Well," she said, forcing out a laugh that sounded too sharp in the silent room, "how was I supposed to know any of that? Rachel never told us." There it was. Not an apology, a defense. I looked at her and felt something inside me settle. For years, I had imagined that if the truth ever came out, Beth would finally understand. She would look embarrassed, maybe ashamed, maybe even say she was sorry. I had given that fantasy too much power. "I didn't build the version of me you believed," I said. "You did." Her face tightened. "Oh, come on. You were secretive. You never talked about your job. You drove around in that beat-up car, showed up in the same gray suits, disappeared for holidays, and expected everyone to somehow guess you were running military operations." No, I kept my voice even. I expected my family not to treat me like a failure just because they didn't have access to my resume. A couple people looked down. That was the uncomfortable part about public cruelty. Once somebody finally named it, everyone who had quietly watched had to decide what their silence meant. Beth crossed her arms. "I was trying to motivate you." My mother stood. That surprised me more than Grant recognizing my call sign. Mom had spent most of her life smoothing things over, changing the subject, bringing out pie when conversations got ugly, saying Beth means well when Beth very clearly did not. This time, Elaine Mercer didn't reach for dessert. "No," she said. Beth stared at her. "Excuse me? You weren't motivating her." Mom's voice trembled, but she kept going. "You were ranking them." The whole room went still again. "Elaine, don't start. I should have started 20 years ago." It landed harder than anything I could have said. Mom looked at me. Not Beth, me. I let her make everything a competition because I was afraid of conflict. Grant got praised. You got compared. Grant got celebrated. You got told not to make a fuss. And every time I told myself keeping the peace was better than making a scene. Her eyes filled. I was wrong. I swallowed. Mom shook her head. "I loved you privately, Rachel. I should have defended you publicly. For a second, I wasn't 40 years old standing in a community hall. I was 18 again, holding an ROTC scholarship letter while Beth joked about secretaries, and my mother stared at the table. The strange thing about apologies is that the good ones don't erase the hurt. They just stop pretending it wasn't real. Grant stepped beside Mom. "I owe you one, too." I looked at him. He rubbed the back of his neck. "I knew she did this." Beth snapped. "Grant." He ignored her. "I knew she compared us. I knew she used me to make you feel small." His jaw flexed. "And I didn't stop it because, if I'm being honest, I liked being the one she bragged about. That hurt. But I respected him for saying it. I should have shut it down years ago." "You should have." He nodded. "No excuses. No but. Just accepted it." My secure phone vibrated against my side. Once. Then again. Priority pattern. Every part of me changed before I touched it. Grant saw that too. I checked the screen. Asterisk show immediate recall. Humanitarian extraction compromised. Asterisk I reached for my jacket. Beth stared at me. "You're leaving?" "Yes." "Right now?" "Yes. But we're in the middle of—" "I know." She almost looked offended. Maybe she thought this was supposed to be my victory lap. Maybe she thought I should stay and make her suffer through every detail. I had no interest in that. The truth had already done its work. I kissed Mom on the cheek. "We'll talk tomorrow." She held my hand for a second. "I mean what I said." "I know." Grant moved aside. Then Beth said, "Rachel." I turned. For half a second, I thought she might finally apologize. Instead, she said, "You could have made this easier for everyone." I stared at her. "No, Beth, you could have." Then I walked out. 43 minutes later, I was under fluorescent lights in a secure operations center outside Detroit, staring at a map of a coastal city half a world away. Colonel Shaw handed me a headset. 3 aid workers, local driver, 2 children. Convoy missed its checkpoint. QRF is 8 minutes out. A captain pointed to the screen. We have an extraction lane here. I studied it. Too clean. A parked truck hadn't moved in 20 minutes. Another vehicle had repositioned twice without leaving the block. They're waiting for us. The captain looked over. Where? Primary extraction. Shaw didn't ask how sure I was. She knew me better than that. Alternative? I traced a service road behind an old fish processing warehouse. Send them north. Through here. That adds 4 minutes. It also keeps them alive. We rerouted the team. 7 minutes later, hostile vehicles converged on the original extraction point, exactly where we would have been. The room got very quiet. Then the radio came alive. Package secure. All civilians accounted for. 2 children appeared on the live feed, wrapped in oversized emergency blankets. Nobody cheered. We just breathed again. That was the work. Back in Willow Creek, Beth had spent the evening arguing over whether my life counted. Here, nobody had time to ask. People were alive. That was enough. Later, Grant told me what happened after I left. Beth tried to restart the conversation, tried to explain that she had always been proud of him, that families tease each other, that everyone was being dramatic. Grant finally stopped her. If you have to make Rachel smaller to be proud of me, he said, then your pride was never really about me. Then he took off the name tag. Beth had placed it at his seat and left it on the table. Major Grant Colwell, family hero. Beth had printed that herself. By the end of the night, it was sitting beside an untouched piece of sheet cake. For the first time, nobody picked it up. 6 months later, I stood in a ceremony room outside Washington, D.C., with a new set of orders in my hand, and my mother sitting in the second row. I had been selected to lead a joint intelligence directorate. Years ago, that sentence would have mattered to me, because I would have imagined bringing it back to Willow Creek like evidence. Proof that Beth had been wrong. Proof that every joke, every comparison, every little smile she gave me over the dinner table had been built on ignorance. But standing there that morning, I realized I didn't need the proof anymore. That surprised me. The promotion was real. The responsibility was real. So were the years it had taken to get there. But none of those things suddenly made me more valuable than I had been when I was 18 years old with an ROTC scholarship folded in my backpack. They just made my work harder. Mom wore a blue dress and cried before the ceremony even started. Grant sat beside her in uniform. When my name was called, Mom stood before anyone else did, and this time she didn't glance around first. That mattered more than she probably knew. Afterward, while people were shaking hands and pretending the coffee wasn't terrible, Grant came over. So, he said, does Northstar Six outrank me enough now that I have to buy lunch? You owed me a drink 5 years ago. Fair. Mom laughed. It was an ordinary sound. Maybe that's why I loved it. Beth didn't come. She sent a message that morning. It was long, very long. She said she had always known I was capable of great things. She said she had pushed me because she believed I could do more. She said families sometimes misunderstand each other, and that she hoped we could put the past behind us. There was no sentence that said, I was cruel to you. No sentence that said, I was wrong. I read it once, then I put my phone away. Forgiveness and access are not the same thing. It took me 40 years to understand that. A few weeks later, I drove back to Willow Creek. Same old Subaru. Same lake wind coming through the cracked driver's side seal. Same gas station outside town, selling coffee strong enough to strip paint. Mom was already asleep when I arrived. I went out to the back steps of the house and sat there alone. Dad's pocket watch was in my coat. I opened it. The second hand still moved. Asterisk, you don't need an audience to know what time it is. Asterisk, for most of my life I thought the lesson was about ignoring people like Beth. It wasn't. It was about not handing them the authority to define the truth in the first place. Some people will judge you by the car you drive. Some by whether you're married. Some by the title they understand. Some by how loudly you can explain your accomplishments. And sometimes the most important thing you've ever done will be something you can never tell them about. That doesn't make it smaller. Being recognized feels good. I'm not going to pretend it doesn't. Hearing Grant say that Northstar Six brought 11 men home meant something to me. Hearing my mother finally defend me meant even more. But neither moment created my worth. They only revealed what had already been there. That's the part I wish I had understood sooner. You don't become worthy when people finally understand you. You were worthy while they were wrong. And if you're spending your life waiting for someone else's approval before you believe that, maybe it's time to stop checking their compass. Choose your own direction. No audience required. The deepest lesson in Rachel's story is that our worth does not begin the day someone finally recognizes it. Many of us spend years trying to earn approval from relatives, coworkers, old friends, or people who decided long ago who we were supposed to be. We explain ourselves, work harder, stay quiet to keep the peace, and sometimes accept disrespect because confrontation feels more exhausting than silence. But silence has a cost when it protects the person causing harm instead of the person being harmed. Rachel's journey reminds us that self-respect is not arrogance, setting boundaries is not cruelty, and walking away from a relationship that repeatedly diminishes you is not failure. At the same time, the story asks us to look at our own behavior with humility. Have we ever stayed quiet while someone we loved was being belittled? Have we confused keeping the peace with doing what is right? As the old saying goes, actions speak louder than words. Real character often reveals itself over time, especially when no audience is watching. Some people may never admit they judged us unfairly, and justice does not always arrive as an apology. Sometimes justice is simply reaching the point where their opinion no longer controls your peace. If this story made you think of someone or of a season in your own life when you had to choose dignity over approval, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Share your story if you feel comfortable. Tap like to support the channel and subscribe so you don't miss more stories filled with hard truths, unexpected turns, and lessons worth carrying with us. Wherever life finds you today, I hope you protect your peace, trust your own direction, and remember that even after the loudest storms, there is still a quieter road ahead.